Everyone interested in the phenomenon have heard about Bob Lazar. The topic about him is very polarizing and it seems like there's no middle ground. You either believe him or you don't, and some people even hate him. But the reality is that Bob Lazar went head first against the most guarded secret in the human history. In the late 80s, Lazar stated to the public that he worked on a reverse engineering program of unknown advanced technology inside the base Area 51. At that time, the base was secret and the government was denying its existence. He worked briefly at the base, and after a chain of events that involves the government spying on him by bugging his house, the contract was terminated. Bob Lazar didn't know that the government bugged his house and found out that his wife was having an affair. Labeled as a possible liability that would affect his work, they stopped working with him. After that, Bob Lazar acted carelessly and even brought some friends close to the base to observe the testing of the flying objects. This is his original footage made of the observations. After they were caught in the forbidden area, Lazar was threatened, and scared for his life, he decided to go public. He told a very consistent story over time. He first came forward with his claims in the late 80s, and he continued to tell the same story in interviews and public appearances ever since. Let's see some of his evidence. The first evidence that was denied by the debunkers but later came out to be true was that Bob Lazar worked at the Los Alamos laboratory, the facility most famous for its contribution during the Manhattan Project and the developing of the first atomic bomb. After evidence of his employment was obtained, the skeptics' narrative quickly changed from he wasn't working there to he was just a technician, and later to he was probably a janitor or was scanning badges. From Los Alamos, Bob Lazar was recruited to work at Area 51, or more specifically at the part known as S4. Skeptics were denying that Area 51 existed, but it also changed in 2013 when the government officially acknowledged the existence and the name of the base when they declassified the CIA documents about the history of the U-2 spy plane program and the SR-71 Blackbird aircraft. Also, the existence and the location of S4 was confirmed by multiple employees who work at Area 51, and the decorated fighter pilot Freehoff said that people saw Bob Lazar present at the base. Bob Lazar was aware about one more classified thing: the bone density hand scanner used in military facilities that work on classified projects. The presence of the Identimet at Nellis test base was classified info in 1989, yet Lazar knew of their use at the base. Another coincidence? The use of these machines was shown in the famous movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but people thought the machine was a product of science fiction. The movie made by Steven Spielberg is described as a movie very accurate to the true observation of the phenomenon, and some even argue that real info about the phenomenon is released in the movie. Bob Lazar also said that the exotic crafts were using a stable version of element 115 as a fuel for the propulsion. Only a tiny bit of element 115 would be enough for a long time duration of the craft, as the propulsion system didn't produce any waste heat. Element 115, also known as moscovium, was first synthesized in 2003 by Russian and American scientists. It's an extremely heavy and unstable element with a very short life, and it's not found naturally on Earth. Yet Bob Lazar was talking about the element in the 90s. Skeptics argue that it's easy to predict the next elements, but that's not the case. Before its discovery, element 115 was not easily predictable using known chemical and physical principles, and many elements that theoretically exist cannot be synthesized easily. Skeptics are saying that was just another lucky guess because element 115 was predicted to exist in the 60s by scientists who were studying the properties of super heavy elements. These elements, which have atomic numbers higher than uranium, are extremely difficult to produce and study because they decay very quickly and are highly unstable. But when skeptics feel bitter, they would also say, well, Bob Lazar said element 115 was stable. Moscovium is highly unstable, so Bob is wrong. And in the future, when the scientists will produce a stable element 115, the skeptics will say, well, that was just a lucky guess, or scientists predicted that, so Bob Lazar was stealing again. In fact, the skeptics and even the believers who are against Lazar are saying that Bob stole many of the claims from other sources, but he was lucky that those claims came out to be true. That makes Bob Lazar the luckiest man in history. Instead of thinking that those claims are real because there is corroboration from multiple sources, they think that only one source can provide information and every other source that corroborates or adds more to the info is a copycat, which is a complete nonsense. Every investigative journalist seeks for corroboration from multiple sources. We all know about the crash retrieval programs that possibly started in the 50s after the Trinity and Roswell crashes. The scientists in USA started predicting element 115 in the 60s, and Russian-American team produced Moscovium for the first time in 2003. That's a strange coincidence, knowing that Russians and Americans have worked together on many joint projects, and the rumor goes that every superpower country have their own reverse engineering programs. In my opinion, this adds even more credit to the story of Bob Lazar. So, on court and under oath, Bob Lazar has submitted his W-2 form that he was working in the Department of Naval Intelligence. The result, Bob Lazar was not prosecuted for that claim or for forgery, meaning that Lazar indeed worked there. Skeptics argue that such department didn't exist, but other examples show that they are wrong. The researcher Richard Geldrick has found many historical mentions of the department and thinks it's associated with intelligence work involving the CIA. Check him out on Twitter. There are many references to the Department of Naval Intelligence. Another thing that looks like Bob Lazar was right is the way the UFOs are flying. He went in depth explaining their propulsion system and the gravity amplifiers. He only worked on one part of the propulsion system. The work on these classified programs is highly compartmentalized, so the progress is very slow due to lack of communication between the different groups. So to the skeptics who say, well, why don't Bob build a spaceship then? That's impossible for one man. He even stated that there was a slow progress and thinks the military still doesn't know how to replicate the crafts but knows how to fly them. Anyway, he explained the rotation of the craft towards the direction in which the craft is going to move. And the corroboration of this claim arrived in 2017 when the gimbal video from the Navy was released. The craft we are seeing here rotates just like Bob Lazar described in the 90s, so that makes... The only thing that is left for the naysayers is the controversial education of Bob Lazar, which Bob Lazar himself said that it's scrapped by the government. I wouldn't believe this too if I didn't see that with my own eyes. Just take a look at what the DoD is doing to Lou Elizondo even today, despite all the digital records and people like Christopher Mellon, who is former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, vouching for him. They still deny that Luis Elizondo had any responsibility in ATIP, despite the fact that Senator Harry Reid, who created the program, released an official document confirming that Lou was the head of the department. They even went so far to delete the internal emails of Lou Elizondo. There's an ongoing IG investigation about this case. Now imagine what they could have done in the 90s when there's no internet and almost no digital records to a man who doesn't have powerful allies vouching for him like Lou Elizondo has. In my opinion, if Bob didn't went public with his story, he would have disappeared from the face of Earth. And to the people saying, well, why didn't he name his professors and colleagues if he went in that university? Well, think about it. Would you ruin someone else's life? Would you ruin other people's lives just to prove something which is very hard to prove, especially if they have nothing to do with that? Millions of people would have abused those professors and the students which they will deny knowing Bob Lazar anyway, especially if they were threatened by government agents. Just watch this.
They told me that I was wrong, that I hadn't seen anything.
And if he spoke up?
Clearly you were drunk on duty, and that will have to be reported to the Education Department, and of course you'll lose your job.
An official report into Westall just disappeared.
And that is what I find most interesting of all, that I was definitely being told to be quiet.
Bob did the right thing, and even if he lied and is a serial liar, wouldn't you think that he would easily check the professor and students list? At least that was easy to do, and all universities have those records. Now let's see the latest leaked document that corroborates some of the claims made by Bob Lazar. But before we do that, don't forget to like this video and subscribe with notifications on. Also, if you can, consider supporting me on Patreon, because your support is the only way for my channel to survive. In the leaked Wilson Davis notes that describe crash retrieval programs and were recently added in the congressional hearings record, there are few claims that align with Bob Lazar's story. This is noted by Richard Geldrick in his Medium article. I will leave the link in the description so you can read it. He states, Dr. Eric W. Davis, who gave classified briefing to the Senate, described an unproductive crash retrieval program that ended in '89. Lazar stopped working at S4 in '89, describing a hopeless, abusive environment. The notes on the first page mention MJ12 or Majestic 12, which copies straight from the Lazar MAJ on his W2 and work badge, or the word Majestic on his boss Dennis' badge. The Wilson Davis notes describe a meeting at the AG&G Special Project Building at Greer and Paradise, Las Vegas, Nevada. On October 25, 1988, Bob Lazar was interviewed at the AG&G office in Las Vegas, Nevada. Is this Las Vegas address valid? Yes, according to Google. There are many more similarities. Read the entire article, and if you are interested to find out more about the Wilson Davis notes, I will leave the link of a free book made by a few researchers in the description. The book is called Loose Threads. It's a must read. Thank you for watching, see you in the next video.